Hello and welcome to AXSChat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Wendy who describes herself as the disabled CEO and chief solutionist of Fast Facts SOS. So welcome, Wendy. We've been talking a bit on Twitter and we've had conversations before, but could you tell us a bit about your background, how you came to be doing what you do?
Certainly. Well, I consider myself the everything emergency caller solutionist. I love to be the one to fix problems at their roots with user-friendly, accessible, and error-preventing safe technology. I became involved in modernizing how people contact emergency services starting in 2015. My focus has been on universalizing emergency caller tools for all telecommunications operating systems. Let's call it the user side of emergency calls. Imagine this: an emergency strikes, you're taken over by pain or panic, danger is close by, or you have a disability, and you can't talk or dial. How will you get rescued? You can't yet, using a mobile device, but that's going to change. With Safe Tracer's Fast Facts SOS, every smartphone and smartwatch emergency victim will be located, and every person can either trace a shape or make a pre-recorded sound or action to automatically dial 911 or 112, etc. Then, not only does that happen, their pertinent medical facts are relayed, and varied click and text tools are provided to communicate additional information to emergency dispatchers. So every time, all facts are always read to the answering dispatcher before the call can end. So basically, I am a massive problem solver. I go right to the root of the problem and I figure out how to fix it. And I narrow in on the least expensive way to beneficially fulfill every possible user need, pre-emergency happening, because most people don't prepare for their first emergency situation,
Sure.
Especially not an emergency call.
No. So this is a really important topic because everybody needs to be able to access emergency services. So was there something that prompted you to get into this? What was the initial spark for the idea?
Well, originally, I designed Safe Tracer to help people that are in such close proximity to danger, or they're in so much distress that they can't talk or text emergency dispatchers. Because and then right now, there's a recent average rise of 35% in domestic violence and abuse and homicides in our cities and towns. And people now, more than ever, need silent emergency caller protection tools globally, because their safety risk of escalated violence is tremendous, with the probability of someone overhearing them or seeing them on the phone with emergency services, or even grabbing their device and hanging up before they can relay their emergency. So I figured out the solution for a silent panic button that just can't be clicked accidentally, because no one wants the police to show up when they didn't call for them to come, especially these days. So the idea, starting, like I had said, in January 2019, after I listened to Caroline Casey present the Valuable 500 at Davos, I instantly realized how life-saving my technology could be for people with different disabilities. Growing up, my dad was deaf, my grandmother was blind, and my best friend had a heavy foreign accent that constantly made him repeat himself. But I never acknowledged their being different in any way because they weren't to me. But how they could communicate on a standard emergency call, I realized was impossible or difficult. So I set out to tweak my emergency caller screen technology to accommodate people that can't see, hear, move, or that panic, and they can't clearly answer fast or speak at all with emergency dispatchers.
Wendy, I have some clarifying questions. So I know that definitely during the COVID-19 crisis, you know, the police calls are way up in the United States as the United States is really struggling. And we've now had, sadly, over 150,000 deaths due to COVID. So it's, you know, sad. I love Antonio's little cup that he's drinking from. What does it say? I can't read it. Inspire your life. Oh, cool. Cute little cup. Anyway, sorry, can you tell I have ADHD?
No.
Squirrel. Sorry. Okay, anyway, can we back up a little just for people like me? So in the United States, we call 911 whenever we get in trouble. Okay, and I know in other countries they use some similar, they have different numbers. What do they use in the UK and in Europe?
999.
999. How about you, Antonio? Is that the same? What do they use in Portugal?
Yeah, we use a similar number, yes.
All right, cool. Well, it's just interesting, and I think sometimes I think we think it's all the same, right? So in the United States, we're 911. I just thought it would be interesting to notice different numbers.
That's another reason. There's 130 different emergency number combinations worldwide.
All right, cool. So just so that we all understand what we're talking about. So it's a number I'm going to call, and I'm going to have an emergency, and I need to make sure that somebody comes and helps me.
Yeah.
And so, yes.
In Europe, in the old space of the European Union, we all use 112 within the all countries. So the system was a bit different a few years ago, and then it was unified. So every citizen, whatever country, place you are traveling, you know that 112 is the number.
So 112 is the emergency number for the EU, which I think is really good because once again, right, Antonio? So anyway, so I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what we were talking about. And, but then, so I'm in trouble and I call this, hopefully I have the ability to call. I have the ability to speak. I'm just trying to clarify. Okay. So let me just, I just want to create a baseline so that we all are on the same topic. And so, myself, I actually called emergency services a few months ago because my husband responded to a virus in a way that freaked me out. And I was just really scared. It was right before COVID hit and I just was really freaked out. And so I called the emergency services, and it was such a blessing when somebody's on the other end of the phone and able to talk me down because I was a little hysterical, right? But then I think of one of my business associates, Rosemary, and Rosemary cannot speak. So there's so many amazing things she can do, but she cannot speak. And so you think what happens to Rosemary when she calls for an emergency? What happens to somebody that's deaf? And as you said, what happens to somebody that maybe they're having a stroke or somebody's in their home and they don't want you to be heard? So I just wanted to level set that's what we're talking about. Correct, Wendy? Right. And then also, so you have come up with a solution that if I need to call the emergency services and I need to do it in a way that's quiet so that the thug that came in my house, I don't want him to know I'm here, or I can't speak, or I can't hear, or, I'm elderly or whatever, that I also can be successful in calling emergency service or first responders to come and help in my emergency. I just want to make sure that's where we are, right?
Yes.
Right. So what are some examples, Wendy, of people that have needed emergency services? I don't know if you know this, but I assume you do. They've needed emergency services, but they have not been able to use what some would consider the traditional method. I'm going to pick up my phone, I'm going to dial 911, and I'm going to speak verbally to the operator. And I'm going to be able to hear what the operator's saying back. There's multiple levels here. I just want to make sure we all, that to be honest, that Deborah understood, make sure I was on the same page. So, and then I know Antonio has a question, so I'll let you answer that quickly, and then Antonio also has a question. Thank you.
Well, like I said, if somebody, obviously, like you said, is deaf, let's use that example. They do have TTY services, which is the service that they use. But if, for instance, let's just say you're in a club, okay, you don't have to be deaf. You could be a person in a club or in a noisy restaurant or at a concert, and you're trying to contact 911. The first thing they say, if you dial, is 911, what's your emergency and location? First of all, how are you going to describe your exact location? Okay, like nobody, I'm at the concert, okay? Or
yeah, but wouldn't it be that the police can't, if I'm calling from my phone, can't the police pick up on my GPS on my phone and know where I am?
No, not automatically.
Everybody's saying no.
Everywhere in the
I
world.
want that to be the case. No. Sorry.
Yes. There are companies right now that actually, when you dial emergency, the information gets sent to a third party that extracts that location information from your phone and then sends it to the geographical information and your phone number, and then sends it to the correct emergency call center.
And I know it's the towers, it's picking up the towers and stuff like that.
Correct. In certain areas, it's just based off the towers, and sometimes the only location that they receive is the location of the tower itself.
Right. I do know those things. Yeah. So, and that could be miles. There could be miles where they're searching for you. So, because I've heard some really sad, things about this. And Antonio, I know you had a question, so let me
my question was somehow, it somehow relates. We have all this, devices, they're all over the place, and when we call an emergency services, we are not sometimes on the best condition physically, or sometimes we might not be able to speak. So, a person that's called to an emergency services is not someone that can just explain themselves right. We cannot assume that everyone is like that. Everyone is different. So we need to assume that the level of communication are the lowest possible in order for something to work. So considering all the technology that we have today, considering all the issues about privacy that are escalating all over, what are the technologies that you see being more accepted in order to make these type of services more reliable for those who need to provide the service, and also more friendly for those who need help?
Well, my business goal is to convince the world's top 2 technology providers to protect people and save their lives all over the world by making this the universal standard on smartphones and smartwatches and wearables, where it's to make it real life usable in very dangerous situations, accessible to everyone, and privacy protective. The best way is it comes right off the device itself directly to the emergency services. Isn't the best thing, the shortest distance between 2 points is straight. Well, there's no reason why it cannot automatically be read. What happens was, one is a way to dial. You could either, like I said, if everybody had to trace a shape as the standard automatic, like you click emergency and a shape pops up to trace. You trace that, let's just say a circle, and it automatically dials 911. Why that circle? It prevents people from it just clicking the emergency button or dialing 911 by accident, which still happens 1/3 of the time. 1/3 of the calls that 911 answers are either butt dials, excuse my language, or unintentional calls. And then people hang up. And the 911 is, or 112, or they have to now try to contact you back. They have the police or the emergency dispatchers, or if they can't get in touch with you, they are responsible for sending somebody out to make sure that you are okay. Versus with every single phone call, they get the phone number, they get the location read, and then any text that the person would like to text gets read aloud, gets translated to the proper language of that country, or even read in the usual dialect to the responding, to the answering dispatcher.
Is it an app? I think I'm a little confused. Is this an app that we're talking about? So maybe you should tell us, what is this?
Okay.
I mean, is it an app that I put on my phone? So I'm a little, I understand. Thank you for taking the time to explain what we were talking about. I also was thinking, when I called my recent call, I was really freaked out. I was really scared, and I couldn't talk very well because I was crying, and I was trying to get unhysterical because I knew they couldn't understand me. And so, everybody needs this, obviously. But I also do want to just say a stupid point, in that one time the police showed up at my grandmother's house, and they said, no, they didn't. They wound up not coming, but they called us. And my children were there, and there was a little chihuahua, and somebody had called 911. My children said it was the dog. I think it was my children.
Somebody told me that their dog did dial 911.
Yeah.
I've heard it all. Everybody has told me, I've accidentally dialed 911, whether it was they let their kids play with their phones, or they just carrying them around. But that's why I had created the trace a shape, because it's it's impossible to trace an entire shape contiguously by accident on your phone. I'll give you the demo. That's okay. This is not created as an app because most people do not download an app to prepare for an emergency. It just has to happen. Some people don't even realize there's an emergency button on their phone to click, which right now, if you click, it pulls up a keypad that says emergency call on the top in 8 different languages. So you have to, if you glanced away, you would think, like if you clicked emergency and you glanced away and you look back and it says something in Chinese, I don't speak Chinese. I would be like, I must be in the wrong place, and just go back and try to get my keypad to dial 911. But anyway, instead, you would click emergency and a shape would show up. They could have various shapes, so that it would be very hard to hack someone's phone and know what shape would be showing up to make like some sort of false calls. Like it would make it very hard to mass dial 911, making it seem like it came from people's phones.
Right, but it's not your phone. Is this a different device that I have to carry around? I'm still confused
No,
about.
Deborah, maybe I can interject.
Wait, let me.
So
I'm so
it's
sorry.
a standard.
I'm so sorry.
The idea is that it becomes a standard so that it gets built into your devices. So it's like the idea
Is
is
that
that,
okay?
that it's
Sorry.
a design that can be implemented by any of the mobile phone providers, right? Am I correct, Wendy?
Correct. Well, see, Apple's iOS and Google's Android operating systems control the emergency caller screens and functionality of all 3 billion active devices today. So every mobile device user, they deserve to have the best embedded emergency caller and text tools to easily connect and communicate fast and error-free when they're in danger. So it's Apple and Google that have to make the change. They control it. That's how I went back to the root of the problem. So.
And you don't mean Google, you mean Android, right?
Yes.
All right.
Google's Android, I apologize, and Apple's iOS. Those are the two main operating systems that control the 3 billion devices. So it's really convincing them to make the change, because all of these apps that are available, less than 10% of the population has downloaded them anywhere. So, like I said, people don't prepare for their first emergency call, or even after. Did you go and download a smart 911 or something else afterwards? See, this would also, in that text, in the, not only does it read the phone number and the address, in the text box, any preloaded medical information can be also, that's pertinent, would be read. For instance, if you called the police and you had put in there that you were autistic and you don't respond, or you're deaf, so you won't respond unless somebody's directly in front of you, that will be read automatically to the dispatchers every time you call, whatever's pertinent. Or if you're in a wheelchair, if the ambulance is called, then the other medical information would be released to as well.
So I've got another question for you, Wendy.
Yes.
So you mentioned that people don't download an app to prepare for stuff in advance of emergency because it's always going to happen to someone else, right? So are you taking that data, given the fact that people don't prepare, how are you getting the data for that text? Are you taking that from the health information and the personal information that's already on the phone? Is that how it will be done, so that you're not reliant on the individual having to put that extra information in? Or do you have a default which will always be said?
Yes, it would be a default, but it would also, that would have to be provided. I was assuming when they, just like they have, it says medical info now on your phone, which is optional. I felt that as they rolled out this option and told people about it, just 911, your emergency call service has been updated, and you have an option at that time to enter any health information that you would like to emergency services. So as your phone automatically updates, because it came from the iOS or the Android, it would ask you at that time. If you didn't mention it, at least you have the standard way of tracing a shape to contact the services, and you have the option of muting that call to make it silent and to send texts. But yes, the medical information would be necessary to download ahead of time or give permission for your records.
So Wendy, so now that I've caught up, I definitely should drink more coffee in the morning, but now that I've caught up, and it's interesting the point that you made about the apps and the 911 apps, because I love my apps. I download them all the time. But so what kind of progress have you made working with Apple iOS or with Android to adopt these kinds? Because this seems like a very important thing to do, but it also seems like a very tedious, hard thing to do, only because anytime you get to change the way society does things, it seems like, do we have to, I guess we wouldn't have to legislate this, but how do you get the Apples, and I say Android because yes, Android is tied to Google, but of course there are other phones, so Huawei, for example, or Samsung, or I'm sure I'm leaving
Android as their operator.
Yes, and so does Huawei. And so does Google, blah, blah, blah. So I think there's only two right now. There's just Apple and there's Android. But how do you get them to adopt this?
That's the
big question. Okay. So have you
I've
gone?
been influencing them. I've been connecting with all of their executives, and it's a very interesting mix, because I'm in the absolute zone where public safety and accessibility merge. Public safety does not have accessibility people focused on their user parts right now.
Well, I know that Marcy is, though I know that at WID we're really focused on emergency response. So it seems like part of it would be getting, and I understand this is not just for people with disabilities. This is it actually would benefit all people. But have you gotten, talked to some of these large disability groups about getting behind it and helping advocate for this?
Yes, I have, as well as many of the people sorry, I was getting, I'm not used to things clicking on thing. The best, I did meet with Apple's worldwide public safety lead last August with my public safety advisor, as well as my patent attorney. And he said himself, this needs to be on every phone, universally, not just Apple. Because right now, one of the other issues is what works on Apple devices. Some of them you can click the side 5 times and it dials emergency services. Some others you have to click both sides 3 times and it dials.
Every time I pull it out of my pocket.
Oh, that's how you dial emergency services.
Well, no, because you squeeze the 2 buttons there, which is exactly where you grab the phone when you're trying to pull it out of your pocket. It's a poor design.
And then your only choice is to your only choice if you've dialed already is to, it says on the screen, end call. Well, yeah. That doesn't help emergency services, because the call's still going to ring and there's not going to be any information on the phone, on the emergency service.
And also they then ring you back. So you're wasting their resources. Yes. So, and this is a significant issue for public safety, because what's happening is you're taking the resources away from real emergencies. So, while someone's calling me back to find out that once again, I've just been trying to pull the phone out of my trousers, someone else may not be benefiting from medical aid or police help. So a different way of activating emergency contact seems to me like a very good idea. But I'd like to wind back even further, right, back to the beginning, because you describe yourself as this disabled CEO and problem solver. And we've talked about it offline, but you haven't talked about it here, and we're a disability community, and obviously you've talked about your family, but you've been on your own disability journey. So perhaps you could tell us a bit about that, because I think our audience are also going to be very interested in some of the motivation behind why you're so passionate about this. So can you tell us a bit about your personal journey, Wendy?
Sure. Well, I got Lyme disease when I was 35, so 16 years ago. And it totally changed my life. I mean, I was Superwoman who got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and worked out, and I took my kids to school, and then I went to our family car dealership that I was the president of, and I really, then I picked my children up and take them to all their sports. I taught them all their sports, and I got Lyme disease, and for years, I can barely get out of bed. I am the exhaustion, the pain, and I had to change my life. So I said, we had lived in New Jersey at the time. The car dealership was 14 miles from our house, but it was an hour and a half to 2 hour commute with traffic. And I said, there has to be a better way. So we picked up in 2005 and we moved to North Carolina, where we just made life easier. And the car dealership was 3 miles away. And we put everything we went exclusively online sales. And we put all the cars in a giant warehouse, and it made life much better. So good that now 2 of my children have gone into the business and are managing it. And the other one actually has his own social media business that he runs. So it really, then I said, this is really too much for me to go in all the time, to go in. So I was home. I had actually, come up with, I said, let me see if I could invent things on the computer, because I had time and my children were grown. And I said, so I focused on, at the time in 2015, I created a consent app so that I could teach people how to talk together before they considered any sort of sexual relationship. What came out of that was people said to me online, it was my first Twitter experience, where I got negative things of, well, what happens if sexual consent turns into an assault situation? And I said, well, people can't exactly, sit up and dial 911 or go into the bathroom and, call for emergency services or help. And this is just sitting here. I said, I can do this. It doesn't matter. I don't have to wake up at 6 in the morning. I can create these things during my best hours, which happen to start at 10 o'clock at night till about 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I found something that worked for me, and there was just such a need. Then I, researched more about 911 services and found out all these different parts were missing. I thought, just like you did, Deborah, that when you call 911, they automatically know where you are. And that wasn't true. And then I said, well,
I'm bummed to learn that, though. I don't want it to be that way.
No.
In my world, it's not that way. Sorry.
You know, so now my point is, how do I want to prove to Apple and Google that inclusive sells, that safety sells, that protection sells, privacy and saving lives sells, because they want to know what's the value. That's what I heard even when I spoke to the executive from Apple. They're going to know. He said, I know that this should come from the social responsibility department, was his words. However, you know, it has to add value. And I think right now, with the state of the world and people being scared, you know, in times when they never really were scared before, that it's the right time to co-license this so that we could sell it. I could sell it together with another major company to, you know, license it to Apple and Google.
Sure. So we've reached the end of our half hour already. Time flies. But I did want to say, I think that the regulatory bodies, the emergency services, when they can see, you know, they can see the benefit, right? Because there is a clear benefit to them for not getting the calls. That actually sometimes the value to the organizations like the Apples and the Googles of this world is those big, you know, they're not corporate, they're state entities that happen to also regulate the industry, and I think that's probably the sort of fertile ground. But thank you for telling us about the product, because I think it's really important that people have access and can be safe. And thank you for telling us about your personal journey. We look forward to you joining us on Twitter on Tuesday, and it just remains for me to thank Barclays Access, MyClearText, and Microlink for helping us stay on air and stay accessible. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so
Wendy.
much.